As that unearthly purple haze swallowed every familiar corner of our once peaceful town, I felt the cold grip of an inexplicable dread, a feeling that something beyond comprehension had altered our world forever. Every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat became a whispered question. What had we awakened?
It began on what had been an ordinary morning. I pulled out of the driveway in my time-worn pickup truck, expecting the usual bustle of neighbors and the comforting hum of routine life. Instead, as I drove along narrow lanes lined with modest homes and quiet gardens, a heavy, unyielding silence greeted me. The streets, usually filled with friendly chatter and the occasional bark of a dog, had fallen strangely silent. Every parked car appeared frozen in time. Not a single passerby stirred, as if the town had been held hostage by a mysterious force. My first clear encounter with the peculiar began at a local gas station. Situated on the very edge of town, it had always been a minor beacon of warmth in the early light. But that morning, its glass doors hung ajar, and an unsettling luminescence seeped from within. Outside, flanking the station, two military vehicles sat in perfect, unblinking formation, grim sentinels silently guarding an enigma no one dared to confront. There were no wailers, no rolling sirens to announce an invasion, only the profound weight of an unspoken warning in the air. I stepped out of my truck, and with trepidation I approached the building. Every footstep echoed off the cracked concrete, resonating as if challenging the silence itself. Inside, the space was devoid of the usual hum of daily life. The cool interior light cast long, uncertain shadows across aisles that once thrived on casual transactions and murmurings of community. My eyes, wide and searching, were drawn immediately to a window overlooking the street. There, a dense wall of fog had arisen, a fog that was no ordinary mist at all. Instead, it shimmered with a strange purple radiance, its movement so deliberate and almost sentient that I felt it was watching me back. I remembered the exact moment so vividly, trembling fingers reaching out to touch the undulating surface of that spectral barrier. What I felt was a chill, a texture both liquid and insubstantial, like the gentle press of cool water mixed with an unexpected weight. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to the space between my eye and that mysterious curtain. I quickly withdrew my hand as the sensation turned overpowering, leaving behind a lingering, inexplicable impression that would haunt the corridors of my thoughts for many nights to come.
As hours passed, the visible manifestations of ordinary life began to falter. The once familiar streets morphed into pathways of uncertainty. Every building, each shopfront and home, took on an aura of alienation. The persistent fog seemed to seep into every crack and crevice that defined our town. In every window and mirror, I caught fleeting reflections of a distorted world, where colors were muted and edges of reality blurred into soft gradients of purple and gray.
At home, amid this palpable atmosphere of isolation, my wife and our children gathered together in quiet apprehension. The living room, a place that once echoed with laughter and gentle conversation, now muted its sounds into tense silence. In our nightly vigils by the window, we would huddle close, desperate for some assurance that the change was temporary. Each evening, as I meticulously added details to my battered journal, I chronicled every minutia of our new existence. I wrote about the way the fog transformed our understanding of time, how every tick of the clock seemed to blend with that uncanny haze, and how even the softest whisper of the wind felt layered with meaning. My journal became an act of defiance against the overwhelming sense of helplessness. Each carefully recorded observation, a glimmer of light reflecting from a puddle on the cracked pavement, a silhouette that vanished when looked at directly. The slow, rhythmic pulsation of the mist was a small testament to a reality that was rapidly slipping away. I found that the act of writing not only anchored me, but also allowed me to measure the encroaching fear with something tangible, for in a world where nothing made sense, every word on the page became an anchor to the identity I once knew. Deep within me, another narrative lay dormant, the quiet determination to protect the ones I loved. I was not the man I had been just days ago. The pressures of this new world had transformed me into someone who must be both witness and guardian. My wife, steadfast and calm, emerged not only as a partner in survival, but as the unwavering pillar of emotional support for our children. Every decision I made, every measured step outside into the deserted streets, was driven by the fierce desire to preserve the fragile flicker of normalcy for them. I saw their innocent faces reflected in my mind's eye. Each smile and each tear was a silent question, a plea for reassurance that tomorrow would be kinder than today. In the long, somber days that followed, the boundaries between reality and nightmare began to blur in disconcerting ways. I started to notice subtle yet persistent changes in the environment, the edges of familiar landmarks, old oak trees lining the boulevard, the modest clock tower in the town square, even the humble church steeple, seemed to waver in the distance, as if they were mere apparitions of a long-forgotten past. The fog, persistent and ubiquitous, invaded not just the world outside but also our minds. It seeped into our dreams, where its purple haze took on shapes that were at once mesmerizing and sinister. Amid this surreal atmosphere, my inner life underwent a profound transformation. I began questioning the very nature of existence and the forces that govern it. Was this transformation the result of some natural aberration? Or had our quiet town inadvertently become the stage for a cosmic drama that exceeded the limits of human understanding? Every unanswered question gnawed at the edges of my mind, fostering an ever-deepening introspection. My nights were spent in restless contemplation, the journal pages filling with a blend of raw emotion, hypotheses, and poetic despair. I began to see the fog as an external metaphor for the confusion and inner turmoil that I, and perhaps all of us, felt so intensely during those moments of collective solitude. I also began to delve deeper into the personalities within my own household. My wife, ever the nurturer and rational mind, had quietly assumed the role of emotional caretaker. Her steady presence and calm resolve were the counterbalance to my own spiraling questions. She was driven by an unyielding need to keep our family intact, a need so powerful that every decision she made was imbued with love and caution. Even as my own thoughts raced between terror and determination, she maintained a purposeful grace, a quality that shielded our children from the worst of the fear, while gently encouraging them to cling to hope. Our children, with their wide, questioning eyes and tentative smiles, embodied both the innocence we desperately wished to preserve and the unspoken promise of a future yet to be written. In their simple interactions, a shy embrace, the unself-conscious laughter at a silly joke, the silent wonder at the fleeting colors of a dying sunset, they carried the possibility of renewal. To me, they were vivid reminders that even amid overwhelming uncertainty, life bore the potential for reinvention, for reclaiming fragments of a world that we once knew. Every step I took that day, every word etched in my journal, became a testament not only to our personal struggle, but also to the broader human condition. The psychological terror was profound, but it was not just about the fear of an external mold-breaking reality. It was a battle waged within each of us. Our inner vulnerabilities, unspoken desires, and deep-seated memories surfaced in that oppressive silence, intertwining with the surreal spectacle that enveloped our town. Late in the afternoon, as the fog deepened and the light faded into a cold, eerie twilight, I found myself standing at the threshold of a local park. Usually a place of laughter and rejuvenation, the park now resembled a vacant stage where nature's own drama was playing out in slow motion. The skeletal remains of long-forgotten trees, their bark etched with time and sorrow, stretched upward into a sky that seemed to weep with muted hues of violet. Every fallen leaf carried the weight of quiet despair, and every gust of wind whispered secrets too delicate to embrace. In that moment, the park was not just a space, it was a living, breathing relic of a community that once thrived, a relic now caught in the grip of a nightmare from which waking hell seemed indistinguishable. I wandered along the cracked pathways, the sound of my footsteps merging with my inner monologue. Thoughts swirled in my mind like the ever-present fog, memories of a happier past, fears of an uncertain future, and the desperate yearning to hold on to something real in a world that was rapidly dissolving into ambiguity. The psychological horror was not manifested by overt danger or violence. It was the slow, relentless erosion of all that I had known, a quiet invasion that left me wondering if I could ever reclaim the familiar in the wake of such profound alteration. Time and time again I encountered reminders that the lockdown was not simply a temporary lapse of normalcy, it was a profound cosmic interruption. Everywhere I looked, the tangible became intermingled with the ephemeral. The sound of a distant car horn echoed like a ghostly lament. A reflection in a rain-soaked window revealed not only my own troubled face, but also an indistinct shape lurking just out of view, and even the scent of freshly cut grass, once so invigorating, now carried an undercurrent of melancholy and loss. Throughout that day, and into the long, sleepless nights that followed, I realized that the true terror of the lockdown was not the absence of life in our town, but the isolation it forced upon our souls. The fog, with its silent persistence, had seeped into every crevice of our existence, turning everyday moments into haunting meditations. I began to question whether the very fabric of time and space had unraveled, leaving us stranded between memory and oblivion. Was this our penance for some forgotten transgression, or merely a fleeting aberration in the grand tapestry of existence? These were questions that had no easy answers, yet they burned like embers within me, driving my determination to document every detail, every nuance of this surreal experience. As dusk settled and the last vestiges of daylight faded into a deep and foreboding darkness, I finally returned home. My body was tired, yet my mind roiled with thoughts too vast to contain. Once back in the safety of our modest abode, I closed the door behind me as if to shut out not just the world, but also the creeping uncertainty outside. In the soft glow of a single lamp, my wife sat at the kitchen table reviewing a century-old recipe passed down through generations, a silent ritual that, in its quiet precision, reaffirmed our commitment to the ordinary in the midst of the extraordinary. We exchanged looks filled with equal parts worry and unspoken determination. In that moment, we both understood that while the world outside had been transformed into an alien realm, the human spirit, our family, our memories, and the love we shared remained our only true sanctuary. And so, with every word in my journal and every silent promise shared between us, the struggle against the creeping fog became not just a battle for survival, but also an intimate journey inward, a quest to reclaim the essence of who we once were, even as the world around us dissolved into uncertainty. In the vast silence of that night, with the steady ticking of a clock that now seemed to echo across a chasm of lost time, I realized that our story was only just beginning. The lockdown had shattered the confines of normalcy, forcing us to confront not just external anomalies, but also buried truths about ourselves. Every fear, every hope molded itself into a tangible presence within our hearts, marking the beginning of a journey into realms that neither time nor space could fully contain. I leave you now with this first chapter of our ordeal, a chronicle of a town abandoned by the ordinary, and of hearts set aflame by the quiet, relentless terror of the unknown. We stood at the threshold between a past we cherished and a future we could barely imagine, our souls forever marked by the dread that came with each passing moment under that enigmatic purple mist. If you found this opening chapter as chilling and absorbing as I did, please take a moment to like and share this video. Your support is the beacon in these darkest hours, and it helps keep the truth alive in the face of growing silence, with the oppressive lockdown firmly in place. What had once been a quiet town now pulsed with an eerie mixture of isolation and otherworldly mystery. As the days stretched into a seemingly endless expanse of twilight, I found myself compelled not only to document the inexplicable phenomena unfolding around me, but also to search for meaning hidden within the very fabric of our existence. I began venturing out at dusk, when shadows stretched long and the air grew cool enough to carry secrets. Guided by a need to understand what lurked beyond the thick veil of fog, I took slow, deliberate walks through neighborhoods that had once thrummed with life. Now, every doorstep and alleyway was cloaked in uncertainty. In these moments, I encountered subtle signs of the human spirit still fighting to persist amidst the overwhelming quiet. Faded drawings on walls, small tokens left behind on park benches, and even a solitary, well-worn hat left on a doorstep spoke of lives disrupted, yet stubbornly remembered. Each step through these abandoned centers of community was a meditation in solitude. I wandered down cobblestone paths that curved beneath ancient trees, whose gnarled limbs reached above like silent witnesses to time's inexorable march. In one such forgotten park, I discovered a rusted swing set, its chains creaking under the weight of memories. I sat there for what seemed like hours, letting my thoughts drift, pondering not only the state of the town, but also the shifting dimensions of my own inner life. The oppressive fog, still enveloping the world in its mysterious glow, seemed to merge with the darkness of my introspection, creating an atmosphere where every pulse of the heart echoed with questions. It was during one of these solitary expeditions that I encountered what could only be described as a relic of the past, a small community center, long abandoned yet defiant against time. Its crumbling walls bore cryptic markings and faded murals depicting scenes of unity and hope. I spent considerable time inside, poring over remnants of hastily scribbled notes, memorabilia strewn about, and a tattered calendar frozen on a date that now felt like a relic of an entirely different era. The phrasing in these documents spoke of ordinary lives interrupted, of dreams deferred by unforeseen calamities. There was no mention of overt destruction or brutal conflict, only the slow, agonizing erosion of communal spirit. It was as if those who had once gathered there had simply vanished into the mist, leaving behind only echoes of hope and painstaking despair. My brain churned with questions during these hours of exploration. What had caused this profound transformation of our town? Had it been a natural anomaly, or was it the consequence of something far more sinister, a force that had reconfigured our reality to suit its inexplicable purpose? The answers were elusive, hidden beneath layers of psychological terror that I could neither fully grasp nor dismiss. Yet, in the midst of this uncertainty, I began to discover subtle clues about those who had managed to endure. In a neglected corner of the community center, I found a small stack of photographs, smiling faces frozen in time, each one a testament to a life untouched by the current desolation. There was a bittersweet beauty in these relics, a promise that, despite the overwhelming haze, traces of humanity still persisted. In this labyrinth of shadow and memory, the true depths of isolation began to reveal themselves. I slowly realized that the lockdown was not solely an external imposition. Its effects had seeped into the very souls of the townspeople. The psychological toll was immense. The people who had once roamed these now desolate streets carried within them silent scars of abject loneliness. I began to glimpse in my own reflections and the echoes of voices I sometimes heard in the wind, the internal battle between despair and hope, a struggle for identity in a landscape where nothing was certain. Within my own family, the transformation was equally profound. My wife, a beacon of strength and reason, had taken on even greater responsibility in these dark times. I observed how every measured word and gentle gesture from her resonated with an unspoken promise, an assurance that no matter how thick the fog became, our love and determination would be enough to light the way forward. Her motivation lay in the unyielding desire to protect our children from both the external terror and the internal disintegration of hope. With every soft caress, every quiet conversation, in the deep hours of night, she strove to instill in our little ones the belief that, even in the midst of overwhelming darkness, there was a reason to keep dreaming. I also took time to examine my own motivations and fears. The process of chronicling these events in my journal became an intimate act of self-discovery, a vulnerability laid bare on paper. I wrote long passages addressing the nature of fear itself, exploring how the cumulative weight of the unknown could transform not only the world around us, but also the very core of our being. In these writings, I investigated the paradoxical role of memory, how the recollection of better times could provide strength, yet also serve as a painful reminder of what had been lost. It was a deeply personal journey, one that intertwined the fate of our small town with the inner workings of my own hope and despair. As twilight deepened into a canvas of deep blues and purples, I found myself wandering further into the forgotten parts of town. Beyond the familiar avenues, there were pockets of life that had become almost mythic in their fragility. I encountered a narrow street lined with old doorways whose faded paint and sagging roofs spoke of once vibrant families now consigned to memory. In these moments, the oppressive silence was interrupted by sounds so subtle and soft, a distant creaking of wood, a barely audible rustle of leaves in the wind, that they felt as if they were the earth's quiet lament. I listened, wondering if these sounds might be the whispers of souls who had not entirely left, or if they were simply the natural refrain of a world in mourning. A particularly poignant memory emerged from one such outing. I recalled a time when I stopped by the local library, a structure that had always symbolized hope and accumulated wisdom. Now, its grand entrance was shrouded in a veil of mist. Inside, amidst the tall, dust-laden shelves, I discovered a solitary diary left on a reading table. Its pages chronicled the day-by-day experiences of someone much like myself, someone who had experienced the terror of isolation, yet still clung to fragile notes of optimism. The diary was filled with quiet reflections on the nature of time, memory, and human perseverance. It was not a tale of defiant heroism or overt rebellion, but rather of quiet endurance in the face of an overwhelming force. In each carefully penned word lay the collective heartbeat of a community unwilling to surrender to the chaos of its circumstances. I couldn't help but feel that the lockdown had precipitated a kind of communal introspection, a collective journey into the very nature of what it meant to be alive in the shadow of the inexplicable. Each encounter, however subtle, became a building block in a vast and internal edifice of understanding. I observed not only abandoned streets and vacant courtyards, but also the spectral remnants of a culture that once celebrated life in its fullest. Every battered sign, every overturned flower pot, every discarded toy on a silent lawn was a silent epitaph to the world that had been, a world whose memories were now interwoven with the uncanny presence of this surreal phenomenon. Balancing on that thin line between external observation and internal catharsis, I began to notice that my own inner landscape was evolving in tandem with the changed environment. My thoughts, once linear and untroubled, had transformed into a chaotic mixture of reflection, creative fever, and quiet dread. I found comfort in articulating these new perceptions, a fusion of realism and surreal metaphor that overtook me as the fog continued to dominate the senses. I realized that the loss of normalcy was in some ways a liberation. It allowed me to peel back the layers of everyday life and confront the raw emotions hidden beneath. I was forced to confront my own vulnerabilities, and in that confrontation, I discovered reserves of strength I had not known existed. This period of introspection invited me to reassess the motivations of everyone around me. My wife's strength, forged in the crucible of uncertainty, shone through even more luminously. Every decision she made, every meal carefully prepared in the diminished light of our evenings, every quiet word of reassurance offered to our children was steeped in the belief that love and tenderness were the ultimate forms of resistance. Our children, in their unassuming ways, symbolized both the innocence we fought to preserve and the promise of renewal that each new day might bring. Their spontaneous laughter, even if tinged with apprehension, was a reminder that life in its rawest form was an act of unyielding defiance against despair. In these long, restless evenings, I continued to document my journey with painstaking detail. The pages of my journal overflowed with thoughts and observations, the cadence of my pen, the only reliable marker of time as it marched on relentlessly. I wrote of every sensory detail. The subtle scent of rain mingled with the cool, damp aroma of the fog, the almost hypnotic sound of distant voices barely carried on a wind that had lost its strength. The way my own reflection in cracked mirrors took on outlines that were both painfully familiar and disconcertingly foreign. These records were not merely an account of external events. They were a map of the internal terrain of the soul, a fragile record of the transformation each of us was undergoing. Over days that blurred together into an indistinguishable haze, each encounter and every internal revelation added to the tapestry of this altered existence. The lockdown was not a singular event, but an ongoing state of being, a slow metamorphosis that reshaped every fabric of life, from the tangible landscape to the intangible boundaries of the mind. Every instance of quiet solitude, every sleepless night spent in reflection, became a piece of a grand puzzle that I was determined to solve. Even as the fog receded in certain corners of town, its lingering presence in my thoughts served as a constant reminder that the battle was fought as much within as without. I now find myself trapped in an endless dialogue with the unknown, a conversation that is measured in moments of introspection and punctuated by fleeting glimpses of hope. And as I continue to probe the depths of this mystery, I remain ever aware that every answer uncovered only gives rise to further, more profound questions. The psychological terror is not in sudden shocks or explicit horrors, but in the gradual unspooling of a world that I had once taken for granted. In this unfolding narrative of silence and wonder, each step forward is both an act of discovery and an embrace of the deep, slow currents of loss that ripple behind the mask of our everyday identities. If you're as intrigued and perhaps unsettled as I am by these eerie mysteries and the inner struggles of our transformed existence, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts and experiences. Your reflections and insights enrich this ongoing exploration into the depths of the unknown. As the days turned into long weeks under this perpetual lockdown, a new, fragile hope began to stir beneath the weight of the relentless fog. The oppressive purple haze that had once shrouded every facet of our town seemed, in gradual hints and subtle caresses, to recede ever so slightly. It was as if the mysterious force that had transformed our world was growing weary, releasing its grip just enough for a sliver of light to break through. And with that faint glimmer came the idea, a desperate, trembling possibility that somewhere out beyond the borders of our isolated town lay refuge, a sanctuary where battered hearts and haunted souls might find solace. Determined to explore this possibility, my family and I made the momentous decision to leave behind the remnants of a life that had once been familiar. The decision was not made lightly. It was born out of a need to reclaim control over our own destiny and to search for a place where the relentless uncertainty could be replaced by even a modicum of stability. In the early dim hours of a cold pre-dawn, we gathered our meager belongings, rations carefully preserved over countless anxious days, cherished mementos imbued with memories of brighter times, and the few personal items that reminded us of who we once were. There was no grand farewell, no dramatic escape. It was a quiet, unanimous resolve that we must press onward, despite the overwhelming fear and debilitating unknown that spread around us like a shroud. The journey from our besieged town was a slow, measured exodus through an altered landscape, a place that bore the scars of metamorphosis in every cracked pavement and overgrown field. We traveled along winding back roads flanked by ancient trees whose limbs stretched like pleading hands toward the heavens, as if imploring nature to offer some semblance of redemption. With each passing mile, the oppressive blanket of fog began to thin, revealing glimpses of a world that, although marred by uncertainty, still held vestiges of hope. Abandoned farmhouses, silent witnesses to days of old prosperity, emerged from the mist like tombs of memory. In each, the overgrown gardens and weathered walls whispered of lives once shared in laughter and love, a love that now flickered precariously in the hearts of those brave enough to voyage onward. The journey itself was both physical and profoundly psychological. As I drove along quiet highways, with my family huddled in the worn seats of our vehicle, my mind would drift between stark recollections of that fateful lockdown and the uncertain promise of what might lie ahead. I recalled with bittersweet clarity the haunting silence of our desolate town, the sensation of unseen eyes following my every step, and the overload of sensations that accompanied each solitary night. And yet, with every mile we put between ourselves and the phantom town, a small but resilient ember of optimism began to kindle within me. There were moments of quiet introspection during the long drives, a silent communion with the self. I would stare out at the endless fields where nature, in its relentless cycle, continued regardless of the human chaos. The hum of the engine became a steady metronome against my racing thoughts. I recalled my journal entries accumulated over those tortured days, the meticulous descriptions of mist and memory, of dread and the fierce clinging to hope, and of the intimate portraits of those who shared my struggle. In those scribbled lines, I could sense a spark, a belief that even in the face of an unyielding force, there existed the possibility of renewal and new beginnings. At a certain point in our odyssey, our path led us to an isolated farmhouse nestled in a valley where the land seemed to exhale the lingering notes of a forgotten era. The farmhouse was a ramshackle structure, its weathered exterior testament to years of quiet endurance. I approached it with a cautious mixture of hope and trepidation, guided by a reluctant intuition that here lay a temporary refuge from the ceaseless terror of the outside world. Once inside, I discovered remnants of a life that had been lived fully, a collection of faded photographs, handwritten letters, and even a small dusty Bible that bore the weight of generations past. In every corner there was evidence of a community, of love intermingled with sorrow, and though the house itself was silent, it spoke in gentle, fading echoes, a reminder that humanity, fragile as it was, had once flourished, even in the midst of darkness. While we settled into this provisional sanctuary, every creak of the wooden floorboard and every shudder of wind against broken windows became the backdrop to our collective introspection. At night, we gathered in a modest living room, our conversations soft and mirroring the tender vulnerability of our state. My wife, ever the bastion of quiet courage, consistently reminded us that hope was a shared flame that had to be safeguarded despite the overwhelming chill of uncertainty. Each whispered exchange fostered a sense of unity that transcended the palpable fear. Our children, wide-eyed and curious even as they absorbed the somber mood of our predicament, became vivid symbols of the unyielding promise of the future, a future that, no matter how distant or uncertain, beckoned with the allure of possibility. Throughout these weeks away from the town, I continued to chronicle every step of our journey. My journal evolved into a tapestry of observations, the interplay of light and shadow along desolate highways, the soft murmur of nature's reclaiming call, and my own internal struggle to reconcile the lost past with the unfamiliar present. Every detail, no matter how trivial it might have once seemed, was now imbued with significance. The psychological impact of our flight was profound. Each sunrise was a bittersweet victory over the encroaching despair of night, and every fleeting moment of clarity was cherished like a rare gem. There were also instances when the road itself became a mirror for our inner lives. In the solitary stretches between small towns and abandoned industrial zones, I would gaze out over endless horizons where the mist gradually gave way to the gentle luster of early daylight. The silence of those vast expanses brought with it a meditative quality, creating a space where I could confront the raw truths of my fears, regrets, and the deep-seated longing for a reconnection with the world I once knew. In those moments, the lockdown and all that had transpired felt less like a curse and more like a transformative passage, one that compelled us to examine not only the phantoms of the external world, but also the hidden specters within ourselves. My inner monologue grew ever more intricate during these long drives. I questioned whether the mysterious fog had been a manifestation of nature's own mourning, a collective grief echoing the fall of innocence in a world too often marred by the inevitable decay of time. Each question led to another, spiraling into realms of philosophy and spirituality that both challenged and comforted me in equal measure. I began to see our flight from the old town not solely as an act of desperation, but as a pilgrimage, a search for a place where the fractured pieces of our lives could be mended, where the human spirit could be rekindled amidst the barren debris of a forgotten era. In the quiet moments at dusk, as the shadows lengthened and the subtle hints of hope appeared on the horizon, I looked at my family, my steadfast wife, whose eyes shone with both determination and tenderness, and our children, whose resilient smiles defied the oppressive melancholy of our circumstances. Together we became a microcosm of a larger human struggle, the perpetual quest to find meaning, to hold on to cherished memories even as the world around us shifted into uncharted territory. Amid these reflections, there was an unmistakable realization that our journey was more than a physical relocation. It was an inner odyssey, a gradual emergence into awareness and acceptance of the transient nature of life. Yet, even in this provisional refuge, the specter of the unknown persisted. Each night, the farmhouse's creaking walls and the distant sigh of the wind seemed to whisper warnings of lurking mysteries beyond our temporary sanctuary. I would lie awake listening to the soft rustle of leaves outside and the muted hum of distant engines, pondering if these were subtle reminders that our escape was only a brief reprieve from a larger, more relentless storm. Despite the precarious sense of safety, the underlying tension, the sense that the fog might return, or that the forces which had upended our lives might resurface, remained ever palpable. I found solace, however, in the unity that had blossomed within our family during these trying times. My wife's quiet strength was not only a beacon of normality, but also a powerful motivator for us all. She spent long hours enveloped in thought, gently preparing meals, tending to our modest garden, and gathering remnants of past joys, a worn music box that still played a half-forgotten lullaby, a collection of hand-me-down photographs that captured moments of genuine happiness. Each of these gestures was imbued with a desperate hope, a hope that we could somehow rebuild a semblance of the life that had been so brutally interrupted. Our children, in their unassuming way, offered inspiration anew. Their innocent observations, a spontaneous giggle at the sight of an old toy left behind in a corner, an earnest question about the nature of the morning light, served as potent reminders that even the most shattered lives can find beauty in simplicity. They represented the future, a future undetermined by the chaos of the present, but full of possibilities. In their unguarded laughter and tentative steps toward understanding, I saw the promise of renewal that burned quietly yet persistently within the depths of human experience. As we pressed further along the winding roads, the landscape gradually transformed from the remnants of a town gripped by an unknowable force to open vistas of possibility. The fog, though never entirely vanishing, began to recede into the far distance, giving way to clear patches of sky and gently rolling fields. With each kilometer traveled, my heart filled a little more with both cautious relief and a renewed sense of purpose. I realized that our flight was not only an escape from an eerie lockdown, but also a journey toward rediscovering the essence of life, a voyage into the heart of hope itself, where every small victory over despair was both a renewal and a tribute to our unyielding resilience. I continued to record every step, every internal struggle, with an intensity born of both desperation and a quiet determination to understand. The pages of my journal overflowed with revelations, musings on the nature of fear, meditations on the power of memory, and heartfelt expressions of love for those whose light still shone amidst the pervasive gloom. In every written word there was the imprint of our shared humanity, a testament that even when the world seems forever dimmed by uncertainty, a spark of hope can ignite a path forward. Standing now at the cusp of a new beginning, where the haze of the old world slowly lifted and the horizon hinted at a sanctuary not yet claimed, I felt a deep stirring in my soul. Despite the scars etched by months of turmoil, I witnessed that in every heart there existed the power to endure and transform. What had begun as an imposition of silence and dread had, through our struggle, become a quiet affirmation of life. The journey, though laced with the inexorable echoes of loss, was also a celebration of the delicate strength of the human spirit. As the farmhouse's worn door closed softly behind us each night, I would sit in quiet reflection by a small candle's glow, contemplating the intertwining of past, present, and the uncertain future. My thoughts wandered to those lost days filled with the ghastly purple mist, and I recognized that while the pain of that time would never fully vanish, it had also given birth to a clarity otherwise unknown. In that luminous darkness I saw not just the terror of the unknown, but also the undeniable power of hope to shape a new reality, one where each fleeting moment of beauty was a triumph over despair. And so, as the travel-weary days slowly melded into a fragile tapestry of resilience and purpose, I carried with me the conviction that our story was far from over. The transformation of our world had forced us to confront our most intimate selves, leading us toward an inner illumination that bridged the old and the new. Every mile traversed, every memory recorded, was a quiet testament to the promise that even amid the relentless gloom, the human spirit can find its way towards the light. If you're captivated by this journey toward hope and the introspective voyage into the depths of the unknown, please subscribe to Nightmare Narratives and hit the bell icon. Your support ensures that every new chapter, every whispered secret from the darkness reaches those brave enough to listen.